Hello everyone, welcome to one of my famous walk and talks. I am Walt, and today we're talking about global warming. So, yeah, nice snowy day here, and we're getting into global warming. Does it happen? How do we solve it? And there are a bunch of different methods to go about doing that, so let's get that out there and get to working on some good old solutions to it, besides the ones that are conventionally kind of shoved down our throats about it. So, global warming. Global warming tends to be caused by an excess of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. This is mainly by burning fossil fuels in order to make energy and, stuff like that for our electricity, for our transportation, for making certain chemicals. There are a lot of different reasons we need energy, and burning your carbon-based fuels is always a good way to get energy, at least as up to now. But you have the long-run consequence of filling the planet's atmosphere with a much higher carbon dioxide level. Now, this is a problem because when carbon dioxide is in the atmosphere, it produces the greenhouse effect. So you have heat that is going to Earth, okay, and it bounces off the Earth and it goes back up through the atmosphere, and this heat, the infrared there, is now hitting your carbon dioxide molecules, and they are reflecting some of it back to Earth. And the problem here is that it's going to keep the cycle going. So it's not necessarily the problem that it's there. You need the greenhouse effect in order for life to exist on this planet as it does. But when this happens, you see, if you have too much, you get this reflection time and time again. If it gets through some of the carbon dioxide, it goes to the others that will reflect some of it back, and it's basically keeping the heat here much longer. That's kind of the long run effect of it. It's taking the heat that would normally be leaving and keeping it here longer. And if we really are allowing it to linger for too long, then you're going to get a higher level of heat for the planet, and this is a problem in the long run. You also have the carbon poisoning of the oceans, as that will happen with the water turning to carbonic acid and all that kind of stuff. So that's why you have problems there. The higher water temperatures killing off corals, all that other kinds of stuff. So there have been a few proposed solutions like the Green New Deal and things like that that could take some action against this. There's the climate accords, all that kind of material about solutions to global warming. So here's kind of my personal take on some of these solutions, what could work best, what, is going to be the worst, all this kind of stuff. So first off, I want to get into the fact that a lot of people, when they talk about global warming, they have kind of this sickening thing of we're all doomed, there's no hope, we all screwed up so bad, and we should feel bad that we burn, any bit of fuel that's going to turn to carbon dioxide. If we release any carbon dioxide, we're all monsters, you shouldn't fly places because of carbon dioxide. And people just keep going with this kind of stuff, and they just keep it going, and it's kind of ridiculous how much they get into hating on what's happening. And they go even further. They say, this is a problem because of this, and we'll never solve this, there's no hope, all that kind of stuff. And then they say the only solution is to cut consumption. So let's get rid of all of our farming of animals, and let's, we're going to do this crazy thing and this other crazy thing. Let's only buy food here. Let's get rid of world trade in this way. Let's put these huge taxes here. Let's do this. And they're kind of saying we should never burn any fuel that will ever become any amount of carbon dioxide. Well, one thing is you can't completely, of course, get rid of carbon dioxide release, even if you were to get rid of all of energy production, because you're dealing with the problem that we ourselves produce carbon dioxide. That's kind of how, the respiratory system works here, converting your oxygen into carbon dioxide. So, yeah. Fun stuff there. That's kind of, we burn that to make carbon dioxide, but yeah, it's not as big as all these other projects. Still, global warming is a problem, so they raise a good point on how we need to be, more environmentally conscious and do better things for the environment, but they go a little too far often, and they get people to be sick of hearing about the topic. So let's get into somewhere where the topic makes sense, how it can be used effectively, and how we can actually do something about it. Well, one of the main reasons, of course, we burn carbon dioxide is for a bunch of energy. So if we have alternative energy, then we don't need that. Some of the best options, solar and wind here. Solar panels are getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. Solar panels are just, you know, one of their main components is just silicon dioxide, which is sand. So we have a lot of sand all over the world here. We can produce a large number of solar panels, and until recently they were a lot more expensive to produce, but now they're pretty cheap. So if we can mass produce solar panels, they can actually become cheaper than a bunch of other sources of power. Now, a bunch of coal power plants are also shutting down, as coal is a horrible fuel, okay? In terms of its output of energy, it doesn't give you a good output of energy. It's not worth very much money anymore. It is just a bad fuel, leaves behind heavy elements. It's just not worth it, okay? So we're kind of going with the policy now of using natural gas instead. That's a jump in the right direction, as natural gas is a much better fuel. But in the long run, a divergence from fossil fuels is desirable if we want to really cut that down. So first off, here are a few ways to cut your use of carbon dioxide as like a society, not just like, you know, cut your consumption kind of stuff, because people don't want to cut consumption. I get that. So it's also a little unreasonable in many cases. Regardless of that, let's kind of dive into how we can actually solve some of this. So alternative energy sources, as I suggested, are a good way to produce power. Increasing your amount of solar and wind, particularly if you're going to put subsidies on those, as the government around the world, anywhere, subsidies are always pretty helpful as long as you have a good way to pay for them. And so that's always good. You could suggest the carbon tax to some degree. Higher gas taxes are, you know, optional, but a lot of people really hate those kind of policies and aren't going to want to go for them. And I get it. It seems like something you'd need to do if you're a little closer to the point of no return than we currently are. But yeah, we're getting closer to that. So doing something more than most of the world's doing about it is probably a good idea here. Now, one thing, electric cars here. Electric cars have fewer moving parts, they last longer as vehicles, but they're too expensive in general for most people to want them compared to a gasoline-powered car. So I think that a subsidy there would also be useful. Another thing I want to get into is fusion. So if you can get deuterium-deuterium fusion working, that is the best, you know, unlimited kind of fuel source. It would last billions of years, gives you more energy than anything else. That's always a good idea. Another great option is nuclear, okay? So just nuclear fission. A lot of people think that's actually dangerous. It's one of the safest energy sources there is, okay? A power plant that is a nuclear power plant cannot blow up like an atomic bomb, okay? And unless they spill the waste outside, the waste is not getting out. Now, yes, it would be better if you had something that would not produce so much nuclear waste. Finding something to do with it, always a good idea. But regardless of that, nuclear power is an extremely safe case. Chernobyl was basically the only nuclear incident that ever actually killed anybody. Look to Fukushima there. Look, of course, to 3 Mile Island. You'll realize that these meltdowns were not actually as dangerous as you might have thought they ended up being. Anyway, worth a look into it. I'm not going to try to entirely convince you that nuclear is like the best power ever. I'm just saying it's a good alternative kind of fossil fuel that's not going to produce carbon dioxide up until the point when we have cleaner tech. So always a good option for pushing back the point of no return to some degree. Other answers to global warming, of course, there is the idea of carbon capture. So taking carbon dioxide right out of the air and bringing it back to the earth, getting rid of the problem there. Or when it's produced in power plants, like natural gas power plants, taking it from its production and then just capturing it there, not releasing it into the atmosphere. These are both pretty great options. The first one, if you look to the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, you'll see that it cycles on a year-to-year basis, okay? Well, rather throughout the year, not a year-to-year basis, sorry about that. So throughout the year, it cycles. At one point, it will go up, and the other point, it will go back down. And one of the main reasons is for this is due to the fact that you have the northern forests. The northern hemisphere has a lot of forests, and these trees absorb a lot of the carbon dioxide. But the southern hemisphere does not pull its weight, and so a bunch of that is then, during that season, the carbon dioxide amount is just going to increase. And so if there was no extra carbon dioxide in the system, this would not be a problem. But since we are always adding a lot more, the northern forest cannot absorb the amount that is coming in. But if we had a lot more southern forests and more of the rainforests, and say if we regrew the deserts in a lot of the Sahara, depending how you want to pronounce that one, or in Australia, places like that where you have a lot of desert that could be greened. There's some good methods for greening deserts. There are a few different kinds of new technologies they've developed there for how you can put in a layer of clay so you can allow moisture use for farming in the deserts. You can also use a method for using solar irrigation to make it, an almost carbon negative reaction. And so if you use those kind of methods, that's an easy way to capture extra carbon dioxide. But you do want plants that are going to be, really good at capturing carbon, of course. Which is the job of all plants, of course, but, some of them do it faster than others and all that kind of stuff. And, of course, if you want to go to a genetic engineering of your own super plant, that's always an option. But, that kind of stuff is tricky, depending on what kind of CRISPR-Cas you're using and all that kind of stuff when it comes to that reaction. Regardless, that's a good solution for that. There's a chemical solution here with carbon absorption where you can put together your nice vat of chemicals here which will absorb your carbon dioxide as soon as it's released. You could put these in the atmosphere, or you could, better yet, exposure to the atmosphere, not like put them up there. But, what you want to do is you want to either put them outside to absorb carbon, because there are a few different pieces of solar tech that can do that. There's also an interesting method you can have. We will convert the carbon dioxide temporarily into carbon monoxide and then later into plastic. Now, this is dangerous if you were to release the carbon monoxide, but if you do the reaction right, you can get plastic out of your CO2 emissions instead of CO2. So, hooray. Anyway, so with those kind of solutions, and with the last ditch effort solutions that will kind of throw Hail Marys right before the point of no return, like the whole acid rain solution where you release a huge amount of I believe it's sulfur into the atmosphere, so you get a resulting level of acid rain, but you temporarily cool the earth. So there are a few last ditch efforts that I really doubt we're ever going to have to use, because humanity is very resourceful, but in case, we have them. Now, when it comes to resourcefulness, I want to mention the aerosol kind of crisis here with the ozone layer back in the 1990s. See, we had the issue of the, the trifluorocarbons there. I'm trying to remember the exact name of the particles, but these things that were destroying the ozone, that were in a lot of your refrigeration material, hairspray, stuff like that. And so they put together a good cap and trade system that was effective, and the ozone layer has now replenished greatly since that period. So people act like the ozone is still being destroyed, but since this has been a fix here, the ozone has come back. We've majorly replenished the main areas of it at the very least. And the reason is because humanity came up with a solution and got together and did it. Now, I understand that that issue is pretty small compared to your global warming issue. But the thing is, we can solve anything if we put our heads down to it, okay? If we work on this kind of stuff, if we think about it, if we talk with each other about it, we can come up with a solution. Scientists are working every day on this kind of stuff. People have done things that seem like they're impossible forever, as long as humanity has existed, particularly in the last 100 years, and I'm sure we're going to do about 10 times more than that in the next 100. So, I would say the big thing is you don't want to be panicked every day about the destruction of the earth and our way of life. Of course, you don't want that to happen. You don't, want high emissions. You don't want to do this. But you also can't cut your consumption to zero here and just live a life where you're not, enjoying yourself, when you're not going out and exploring the world and doing the things that matter to you, okay? So you want a balancing act where we can come up with good solutions that can simply just knock this problem out of the park, okay? And at the same time, of course, we can cut our consumption to some degree and work to do a better job in that kind of department. But cutting consumption is not the main answer. I would say the main answer is turning to these alternative sources of power, because people are not, on a whole, going to cut consumption unless they absolutely have to. And if they do, the economies of the world are going to slow down a lot more than they already are to some degree. So you want to watch out for that, okay? And yeah, that's kind of my takes on global warming. It is a problem, okay? I'm not going to say it's fake, because it's real. It is a proven thing, and this is a problem, okay? That said, there are many solutions that many people have worked on here, and all you need is a massive implementation of them, okay? Particularly if you add a few of them together, that would be the best possible outcome. So yeah, global warming has a lot of solutions. People pretend like it doesn't, but it does, okay? So let's just implement some of those solutions. Let's get our solar up there. Let's work on other fuel sources, such as fusion. Let's add back some more fission than we're already doing, okay? And of course, working on replanting deserts, using more carbon absorption. We can actually create a carbon negative system to negate a lot of the world's pollution of carbon and to fix this problem before we have permafrost melting and a lot of the world's problems really culminating to a point of no return. So yeah, anyway, just thought I'd give you guys my take on some global warming stuff, how we can solve it. And yeah, thank you all for watching. I am Walt. I will see you guys next time with our next video, so stay tuned. I'll see you then.